Welcome back, everyone, to the Wisdom of Lao Tzu.
Great to be back.
Today, we are tackling one of the most, I think, profound single ideas in Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. That's chapter 35. And we're going to dissect its, well, kind of terrifying relevance for us today in the 21st century. It's all about this hidden power, this infinite power within things that seem, utterly plain, even unexciting.
Yeah, and to really grasp the power of chapter 35, I think we need to rewind a bit. We have to recall that warning Lao Tzu gave us back in chapter 12. He really sounded this startling alarm. He told us, the 5 colors blind the eye, the 5 notes deafen the ear, the 5 tastes numb the palate.
Right. And those lines, they just hit so hard against, well, everything in our modern consumer culture, don't they? Lao Tzu wasn't just saying, too much pleasure is bad for you or unsatisfying. He was making a really specific, almost surgical point.
Exactly. He's saying excessive stimulation actually damages our ability to experience things properly. Too many bright colors, and you can't see subtle truth anymore. Too much loud music, you can't hear nuance. Too much rich food, and your palate is just ruined for simple tastes.
Yeah, you get trapped in this frantic, endless chase for the next bigger hit, the next stronger sensation.
And that wisdom, powerful as it is, it's fundamentally a defensive move. It's like that stern elder you mentioned pointing at the cliff edge. You're like, danger, don't go there.
Exactly, a warning. But here's the problem, the modern dilemma we face. When we actually try to practice that kind of restraint, live more simply, reject the constant barrage, the screens, the algorithms, the sheer noise of consumerism.
Yeah.
We often just hit a wall.
You really do. You decide, okay, I'm going to live simply. But the world doesn't exactly make it easy, does it? Your phone feed knows you better than you know yourself. It pushes stuff designed to hook you, to spike your outrage or your desire.
Oh, totally. And then you meet friends, and what's everyone talking about? The latest gadget, the hottest restaurant. That show everyone's binge watching.
Right. And you're sitting there trying to be, quote, restrained, trying to suppress those desires. And what fills that space? What do you actually feel?
Yeah, it can be this unspoken loneliness, right? Or apathy. Or that really modern feeling, FOMO, fear of missing out. You feel like life is passing you by.
And just passively avoiding stuff, pure restraint, it often creates this void, this emptiness.
And that vulnerability, that's what consumer society is brilliant at exploiting. It understands that feeling. The moment you feel that emptiness, it kind of whispers in your ear, doesn't it? Like a very understanding friend.
Yeah, it says, hey, don't deprive yourself. Life's about experience. It's about immediate sensory satisfaction.
And boom, it offers an endless supply of music and fine food, all the pleasures, entertainment, consumption. And it feels like we have to give in, partly because, well, we haven't found anything better, anything more valuable to replace it with.
That's the key. We're passively avoiding the trap, maybe, but we're not actively running towards something else, something positive, something worthwhile.
Okay, so that shifts the question, doesn't it? It moves us away from the negative, how do I avoid the bad stuff, and towards the really fundamental positive question that chapter 35 seems to tackle head on. Is there something out there, something that doesn't give you that immediate, intense sensory jolt, but offers something deeper, something lasting, maybe even infinite satisfaction?
And Lao Tzu's answer is this radical, resounding yes. Absolutely. Such a power exists. And he calls it the great image, which we understand is the Tao itself, the source of everything, the cosmos.
Okay, the great image. But then when you first encounter it, it's not dazzling, is it? It's not thrilling. Lao Tzu uses these words that honestly sound like a bit of a philosophical turnoff, he says. How insipid and without relish it is.
Exactly. Insipid, like plain water, no kick, no spice, not flashy like the 5 colors, not exciting like the 5 notes. It's almost boring.
Right. Boring. So that's the paradox, isn't it? Why on earth would Lao Tzu praise this? And how could he possibly claim, hold on to the great image and the whole world will come to you? That just seems to fly in the face of everything we think about human nature, about what attracts us. We like shiny things, loud things.
But the power, Lao Tzu reveals, lies in this ultimate paradox of value. And it's captured in one absolutely crucial phrase. But use it and it will never run dry.
Okay. Never run dry.
See, the immediate satisfactions, the music and fine food, they're like fireworks. Spectacular, sure, for a moment. But then they're gone, finite, they burn out, and maybe leave you feeling even emptier.
Right. The sugar crash after the candy bar.
Kind of like that, yeah. But the Tao, this insipid thing, it's like an unsailing well, an artesian well, precisely because it doesn't rely on stimulating our fleeting senses, because it doesn't cling to any specific form.
Yeah.
It cannot be used up, it can't be consumed.
So it's infinite, an inexhaustible source.
Exactly. And Lao Tzu goes further. He says, when a person or a leader really grasps this plain, infinite foundation, what happens? The people will come and suffer no harm. They will be peaceful, secure, and prosperous. People aren't drawn by fancy tricks or force. They're drawn by something much deeper, authentic safety, genuine peace.
Okay, that's a powerful roadmap. And it really sets the stage for this deep dive, doesn't it? We're going to attempt a kind of 3D analysis here. We'll start right down at the level of the text itself, do some textual archaeology, then we'll weave in the ancient commentators, the philosophical debates, modern critics, see how this idea resonates across millennia. So let's start by grounding ourselves. Textual archaeology, what are we actually reading?
Yeah, we absolutely have to start here because the Tao Te Ching, as you know, isn't just one single fixed book handed down perfectly.
Yeah.
We have different versions. There are the really old Godian bamboo slips, the Mwangdui silk manuscripts. These are centuries older than the standard version, the Wangbi text that most people use.
Right, and why is that so crucial? Why bother with these older, maybe fragmented versions? Why not just stick with the standard Wangbi text?
That's a really important question. The thing is, these older texts, like the Gaudian slips from around 300 BCE or Mwangdui from 168 BCE, they show us the text before it might have been, let's say, tweaked or massaged by later philosophical schools.
Ah, so before Confucianism or maybe proto-legalism really got their hands on it to make it fit their own agendas.
Exactly. The Wangbi version, while it became the standard, wasn't compiled until much later, around 240 CE. By then, those philosophical battles were raging. So going back to the older source texts, let's just check for those influences to try and get closer to the original ambiguity, perhaps.
Okay, makes sense. And right away, the very first verb in chapter 35 is a point of contention. The standard Wangbi text uses a word that means to hold or to grasp. So you hold the great image.
Right, which implies you're aligning yourself with something that already exists, the Tao. And that picture makes the sage seem like a humble follower, right? It fits really nicely with the classic Taoist idea of wu-wei, non-action, just going with the flow.
Okay, humble follower. But then you look at the older Gradian slips.
And it's a different word entirely. It means to set up or to establish.
Whoa. Okay, that is a massive conceptual shift. If you establish the great image, you're not just following anymore, you're a founder, a powerful founder of order.
Precisely. And that reading sounds much closer to, say, the Confucian ideal of the sage king who creates institutions, or even the legalist idea of the ruler who sets down the absolute law.
So this one word shows this early tension, this fight even, over Lao Tzu's legacy. Was he teaching quiet personal alignment or active, authoritative societal shaping?
It seems that way. The schools were vying to claim him, you could say.
Okay, that difference between aligning and founding is huge. Now, what about the result? This peace and prosperity that follows. The standard text often reads it as a list, right? Peaceful, secure, and prosperous, like 3 parallel descriptions.
Yes, painting a static picture. Come here, and it will be peaceful, secure, prosperous, like a description of destination. But based on the linguistic structure, many scholars argue that the first word in that sequence, on, isn't just another adjective. It should function as an adverb.
An adverb meaning what?
Meaning then, or consequently.
Ooh. So if that's right, the whole sentence changes. It's not just a static wish list, it becomes dynamic, a causal chain.
Exactly. Much more profound. It's not just they come and are peaceful.
Yeah.
It becomes if they come and suffer no harm, that's the cause, the prerequisite,
Yeah.
then consequently it becomes peaceful and prosperous. That's the effect.
So ensuring people suffer no harm isn't just one outcome, it's the input that leads to peace and prosperity. Safety first, then the rest follows logically.
Yes. It turns it from a nice sentiment into a tight philosophical argument about governance, about cause and effect. Safety generates prosperity.
Okay, that's subtle but really important. But maybe the most critical textual difference, the one you called Wang Bai's potential blunder, concerns the Tao's infinity.
Right. This is fascinating. The standard Wang Bai text says that when you use the Tao, it is merely not enough to be used up.
Not enough to be used. Okay, like you said in the intro, that sounds like a really, really big amount, but still finite, quantitative, like a huge mountain of rice. You personally won't eat it all, but it's still theoretically a countable number of grains.
Exactly. A vast but ultimately limited resource. But then you look at the Mwangdui silk text and other ancient versions, they use language that means it is impossible to be used up.
Impossible. Okay, that's different. That's not just big, that's qualitatively different.
It's a monumental leap. It jumps from just an enormous quantity to a state of qualitative infinity. The Tao is no longer just a massive pile of rice. It's the source that creates the rice. It's the field, the rain, the sun, the generating principle itself. It can't be consumed.
And the speculation is that Wang Bi might have changed this just stylistically to make it sound nice.
That's the intriguing theory, that he was trying for a poetic neatness. He wanted it to parallel earlier lines about the Tao being not enough to be seen or not enough to be heard. So he uses not enough to be used up for symmetry.
And accidentally gives the Tao a massive philosophical downgrade, makes it finite just to make the sentence structure match.
Wow. It's a possibility scholars debate. And just to round this off, the very ending focuses differently too. The common version emphasizes the Tao's function. Use it and it. It's about its utility. But the most ancient slips, they focus purely on its essence. They just state, and it is impossible to be used up. Infinity isn't just how it works, it's what it is.
Okay. That textual deep dive really nails down the foundation. We're talking about something defined in its earliest forms as inherently qualitatively infinite. That gives us solid ground to now explore the philosophy. What is this great image? Right? So if this great image is infinite, but also, insipid, what on earth is it? How did ancient thinkers try to get a handle on this formless idea? You mentioned metaphors.
Yes, a whole range of them, developed over centuries. Let's start with metaphor 1, which is quite influential, the metaphysical operating system.
Okay, operating system, like Windows or Mac OS, but for the universe.
Kind of.
Yeah.
This is the interpretation you see strongly in commentators like Wang Bi and later Tzu. The Tao is the ultimate neutral source, the mother of all phenomena, as Lao Tzu says elsewhere. All the things in the universe, the myriad things, they're like the apps, the files, the programs running on your computer. The great image, the Tao, is that invisible underlying OS that runs everything.
I can sort of picture that. But okay, here's a challenge maybe. An OS, even a really stable one, it seems like it could still crash or get corrupted or just degrade over time, right? If the Tao is totally formless, what keeps it stable? What stops it from just, running down?
That's where the neutrality is absolutely key.
Yeah.
The analogy holds because the Tao is described as having no preferences. It's not hot, not cold, no personal will. Because it's neutral, it doesn't impose its own agenda. It doesn't try to force things into one particular shape or outcome. It's not stressed. Therefore, it can contain everything, all the diversity, conflict, growth, decay, without that process harming or exhausting its own fundamental structure. Its stability comes from its complete lack of bias.
Okay, stability through neutrality. That makes sense. It doesn't wear itself out trying to control things. Now, metaphor 2 sounds like it goes in a totally different direction. The melting cup of no self. That sounds much more internal, Zen influenced.
Definitely. This comes from figures like the Zen master Ching. Looking at Lao Tzu through a more Buddhist or meditative lens, he argued the great image is really that which has no image. And holding it isn't about politics or cosmology primarily. It's an intense internal spiritual practice.
Okay, so how does the melting cup part work?
Well, if Wang Bai's sage is like an empty cup, neutral, receptive, able to contain the world, Han Shan says the advanced practitioner goes further. They don't just empty the cup, they melt the cup itself. They dissolve the ego, the sense of a separate self.
Whoa, melt the self.
Yeah, and by dissolving those boundaries, the sage doesn't just contain the world, they become one with the world. They achieve that state of no self.
Okay, that explains that idea we touched on earlier, the attraction of belonging. If you dissolve the self, you're not an isolated island anymore. You become part of the ocean. You'd radiate that sense of unity, that warmth.
Precisely. And then there's metaphor 3, which is maybe more cognitive or perceptual, the whole elephant of knowing.
The blind men and the elephant parable.
Exactly. Our everyday sensory perception, those 5 colors, 5 notes that Chapter 12 warns us about, that's like touching just one part of the elephant, the leg, the ear, the tail. It's a piece of reality, sure, but it's just a fragment, not the whole truth.
Right. You mistake the part for the whole.
The great image in this view is the total reality, the whole elephant. And you grasp it not by adding up more sensory fragments, but by letting go of your attachment to those fragments. It requires a shift in perspective, an intellectual and perceptual leap beyond just the senses.
Okay, so we have these different angles, the OS, the melting cup, the whole elephant, all pointing towards this powerful yet somehow plain foundation. Which brings us back to that central puzzle. Why? Why does this formless, insipid thing have such magnetic power? Why would the whole world be drawn to it? Let's break down those 3 attractions you mentioned.
Okay. First, the attraction of safety. This flows directly from that Wang BOS logic. People, fundamentally, are drawn to the Tao's absolute fairness, its lack of bias. Think about it. In a world full of manipulation, unpredictable rulers, hidden agendas, what people crave most deeply is genuine safety, security from harm.
Not just treats or rewards, but actual safety.
Yes, the Tao, being neutral, provides that ultimate unbiased platform where things can exist without being arbitrarily harmed or favored. That's deeply attractive.
Okay, safety. Then the second one.
The attraction of belonging. This comes from the melting cup idea, the no-self perspective. The sage who has genuinely dissolved the ego radiates this profound sense of kinship, of connection. Lao Tzu talks about a warmth like the spring. It fosters this deep, almost familial sense of belonging, the feeling of being one body with all things. That's far more powerful and lasting than the superficial togetherness you get from, say, sharing some music and fine food.
A deeper connection. Makes sense. And the third.
The attraction of nature. This is more like the common sense political logic. Simple, good governance. It's the idea that people are naturally drawn to places where life can flourish, just like water flows downhill. So, a leader who holds the great image doesn't need complex schemes or coercion. They just need to create the basic conditions for life. Ensure people suffer no harm.
Just get out of the way and provide safety.
Essentially, yes. Create the right conditions and the population will flow in naturally, like rivers finding their way to the sea. And consequently, as we saw from the textual analysis, peace and prosperity arise. It's a natural result, not something forced.
Okay. Safety, belonging, and nature itself. 3 powerful reasons why this plain great image could be so attractive. That natural flow leads us right into the most debated, most controversial line in the chapter. The real academic storm center. Yes, that line. Music and fine food will induce the passerby to stop. This seems like the friction point, right? It forces scholars and us to really grapple with that core Taoist tension. What is the role of the sensory world? Is it always a trap? Is it just an analogy here? Or could it even be somehow a source of energy?
Exactly. This line splits interpreters into camps. The most common view, the mainstream one, is Camp 1, the negative contrast model. This reading says simply music and food are low-level temptations. They're mentioned only to show how much better the Tao is by contrast. They're the distractions, the cheap thrills.
Okay, so Wang Bi saw them that way, as immediate satisfying jolts that just stop the passerby in their tracks, distracting them from a deeper journey.
Pretty much. But modern critics have added layers to that. The cultural critic, Yu Qiyu, for instance, he uses a really vivid analogy. He compares using music and food to a street performer.
A street performer? How so?
Well, a street performer often has to use loud noises, bright colors, and strong flavors. Spectacle. Just to grab your fleeting attention as you walk by. And Yu Qiyu argues that this reliance on sensory tricks actually reveals a profound lack of confidence.
Ah, because if you had real deep value, you wouldn't need to shout and flash, right?
Precisely. If you have the great image, its own quiet power draws people. If you have to resort to manipulation of the senses, it suggests you lack that deeper substance.
Okay, that's a sharp cultural critique, and then Chen Guiying takes it institutionally.
Yes. For Chen Guiying, music and fine food become metaphors for all the complex, man-made systems designed to control or influence society. Think Confucian rituals, legalist punishments and rewards, bureaucratic procedures, all these structures.
Okay, so how are those like music and food?
He calls them fast food or maybe a fever reducer. They offer a quick fix. They can temporarily stop chaos. They can induce the passerby society to pause and maybe conform, but they're finite solutions. They eventually run out. They can't provide the deep, lasting stability that comes from the great image, the underlying principles. They treat symptoms, not the root cause.
That really resonates on a personal level too, doesn't it? This idea of the comfort trap. You mentioned Odysseus earlier. His great image is his destiny, right? Getting home to Ithaca, that's his fundamental, maybe insipid but necessary goal. But then he lands on Calypso's island, and what does she offer? Immortality, pleasure, essentially top-tier music and fine food, comfort. And he stops. He gets stuck. For 7 years, he's induced to stop by the pleasure, forgetting his real, harder journey towards that essential foundation of home.
That's a perfect illustration. It's the seductive power of immediate pleasure. It arrests your forward movement, your progress towards the deeper goal, but it doesn't provide ultimate purpose. It just stops you. So that's the dominant view, music and food as negative distractions. But not everyone reads it that way. There's Camp 2, the positive analogy model.
Okay, a positive analogy. How does that work? Are they saying music and food are actually good?
Not quite good in themselves, but that Lao Tzu is using them as a point of comparison, an analogy, rather than a pure contrast. It's a clever reading. The logic goes like this. The Tao attracts the whole world, infinitely. In the same way that, on a much smaller scale, Music and food get a single passerby to stop, temporarily.
Ah, so it's not Tao is good, music food is bad. It's more like, look how music food can stop one person for a bit. Well, the Tao does that for everyone, forever, but much better.
Exactly. It's a matter of scale and quality. Music and food are finite fragments that stop a passerby. The Tao is the infinite whole that makes the whole world come and stay. It's a statement about different kinds or levels of attraction, with the Tao being the supreme infinite version.
Okay, that's a different flavor entirely. And then there's a third camp. Camp 3 sounds pretty out there. Internal transformation. Alchemy.
Yeah, this one is definitely more esoteric. It comes largely from Han Dynasty Taoist traditions, often focused on internal cultivation, alchemy, health, longevity. Thinkers like He Shanggong. And here it involves this really profound substitution of concepts. The whole scene moves from the external world to inside the human body.
Inside the body. Wait, why did these Han thinkers suddenly start focusing so much on internal stuff, like alchemy? Was the political situation bad?
That's a big part of it, yeah. By the Han Dynasty, trying to implement pure philosophical Taoism in politics had often led to, well, corruption or dilution, or it just proved really difficult. So for many serious practitioners, the only reliable place left to find and cultivate the true Tao was within themselves, within their own body, seen as a microcosm of the entire universe.
Okay, so the body as the cosmos. So in this reading, who is the passerby?
According to He Shanggong, the passerby isn't some traveler on a road, it's the Jing, the vital essence, the primal spirit inside your own body. This spirit is seen as being naturally elusive, easily scattered, kind of skittish.
Like a wildcat, you said. Okay, so what are the music and fine food in this internal landscape?
They are not external sensory hits anymore. Instead, they represent the internal spiritual sweetness or the felt sense of the Tao itself, experienced during deep meditation or cultivation.
Whoa, okay, so the whole metaphor flips. Worldly desires, the external 5 colors, those become like cheap kibble that scare the skittish spirit away.
Exactly. But the Tao's own quiet, deep, insipid sweetness, experienced internally, that's the premium catnip.
Yeah.
That's what gently attracts the elusive primal spirit and encourages it to settle down, to rest peacefully inside, consolidating your vital energy. It's about internal harmony.
3 very different ways to read one line. Negative contrast, positive analogy, or internal alchemy. That really shows the richness and the arguments within the tradition.
It really does. But regardless of how you interpret that specific music and food line, Lao Tzu immediately follows it up with his stunning core declaration, the part that crystallizes his whole vision in this chapter, the ultimate anti-consumerist statement, really.
Which is?
He basically says, insipid is the highest virtue. He writes almost in wonder, but talk about the way the Tao, how insipid and without relish it is. Look for it, and there's nothing to see. Listen for it, and there's nothing to hear. And then the kicker. But use it, and it will never run dry.
The power of plainness. And the ancient commentators had that great metaphor for this, didn't they? Metaphor 1, rice and water versus hot pot and liquor.
Exactly. The Tao is the plain, maybe boring, everyday rice and pure water. Seems unexciting, right?
Yeah.
But it's absolutely essential. It sustains life. And crucially, it's inexhaustible in principle, whereas sensory excess, the constant chase for stimulation, that's the spicy hot pot, the hard liquor. Exciting, sure, gives you a kick, but it's unsustainable. It burns you out. It leads directly back to that numbness warned about in Chapter 12.
And we really need to pause on how hard that choice is practically. In a world that's just screaming for our attention with excitement, choosing the plain rice, choosing the insipid, that takes enormous discipline, doesn't it? Real conviction. We are genuinely addicted to the kick.
Absolutely. It's countercultural, counterinstinctual in many ways, but Lao Tzu insists it's the path to true sustainability and even, paradoxically, to sharper perception.
Right, because the Chapter 12 warning about the numbed palate finds its solution here. If you're always drinking, say, super sugary soda, you chase that intense jolt, but eventually your taste buds get dull. You can't appreciate subtlety anymore.
But the person who learns to appreciate plain water, or maybe subtle variations in tea, the connoisseur of the insipid, if you like, they actually gain a sharper, more refined perception. Insipidness isn't dullness here. It's the clean foundation that allows you to truly perceive the subtle underlying realities.
Okay. And Yu Qiyu built on this with his metaphor 2, air and spiritual MSG.
Yeah, he makes a brilliant point. The Tao is like air, sunshine, water, these fundamental things. What's their optimal state? It's being tasteless, colorless, odorless. Their neutral, insipid state is what makes them universally useful and life-giving. Pure water can be the base for all other tastes because it has no taste of its own.
And he uses that to critique modern life.
Sharply.
Yeah.
He talks about all the spiritual MSG sprinkled over public life. You know, the empty political slogans, the corporate mission statements, the social media posturing, the hot takes, all trying to simulate real meaning or value with intense artificial flavor, designed to hit our already numbed palates, but offering zero real nourishment. Just empty calories for the soul.
Wow. Spiritual MSG. That's a great phrase. Okay, so this brings us back full circle to that ultimate promise. Use it and it will never run dry. Where does this absolute inexhaustibility come from? Why is it infinite?
We can look at it structurally again. It relates back to that OS versus app logic we discussed.
Okay. Remind me how that works here.
Music and fine food,
Mm-hmm.
or any specific sensory pleasure, any specific ideology or system, these are like the content, the apps. They get consumed, they get old, they run out. You need the next update, the next release, the next meal.
Finite.
But the Tao, that's the operating system, is the underlying source that generates and runs all the content. You don't consume the OS itself, you access it. The source can't be used up, only drawn from.
Okay, structural infinity. And Hanshan de King, the Zen guy, he had a biological metaphor too.
Yes, the metabolism versus snacks idea. Sensory hits, worldly achievements, they're like snacks. They give you a quick, temporary boost, finite energy. But the Tao, cultivated internally, is like your metabolism itself. The constant quiet background system that keeps you alive and functioning.
You don't necessarily taste your metabolism working moment to moment.
No, it's just there, doing its thing. But its continuous, efficient operation is, by definition, the basis of life. It's impossible to use up your metabolism in the same way you use up a snack. It is the process of using energy.
So the final takeaway on infinity here is, it's not just a feature, it's a result.
It's the necessary consequence of the Tao's nature. Because it's formless, because it's insipid, because it doesn't cling to any specific form or color or taste. It remains free to be the infinite source of all specific forms. It's everything, precisely because it isn't limited to being any one thing.
Everything because it's nothing specific.
Oh.
Okay, that's a mind bender, but I think I get it.
Now, before we bring this right home to our personal lives today, there's a really important historical shadow we need to address. Something that often clouds how people understand Lao Tzu. It's this supposed link between Taoism and legalism, often lumped together under the term Huang Lao.
Right, I've heard this. The idea, sometimes pushed by people looking at that alternative established the great image reading, is that Lao Tzu was actually providing a kind of blueprint for cynical, authoritarian rule.
Exactly. This belief got a lot of traction early on, partly thanks to the great historian Sima Qian. He wrote that legalism, the philosophy of strict laws and harsh punishments, was somehow rooted in Huang Lao, which sounds like it means a synthesis of Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor's authority, and Lao Tzu's natural way, implying Taoism leads directly to ruthless state control.
Okay, so we need to untangle that. What's the problem with that interpretation?
Well, a couple things. First, Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, he wasn't really the figurehead of a coherent philosophical school back then. He was more like a fictional, ancient super IP, a brand name everyone wanted to borrow. Early doctors, military strategists, magicians, proto-legalists. They all slapped Huangdi's name on their texts to give him an air of ancient authority and legitimacy. There wasn't one single Huangdiism.
Okay, so Huangdi was like a prestigious label, not a single philosophy. What about the Huang Lao thought itself? Was that pure Taoism?
Not at all. The actual Huang Lao thinking that became popular, especially in the early Han Dynasty, wasn't philosophical Taoism in the style of Lao Tzu or Zhuangzi. It was a very practical toolkit for administrators. For ruling, Sima Qian's own father, Sima Tan, described it accurately later. He said it culls the best of the Confucians and Mohists and abstracts the essentials of the legalists.
Ah, so it was syncretic, a pick-and-mix approach for effective government, borrowing from everywhere, including legalism, and just maybe using Lao Tzu's name for some legitimacy or ideas about naturalness.
Precisely. It was political craft designed to maximize state power and efficiency, not necessarily aligned with Lao Tzu's core ideas about minimizing interference or personal wisdom. Which brings us to the real fundamental gap between Lao Tzu and the legalists. The scholar Xiao Gongquan really nailed this. Any similarities are purely superficial. At their core, their foundations, their methods, their goals. They're polar opposites.
Okay, let's break that down. The legalists, like Han Fei, they were all about control, right? Using Fa law, Shu, method technique, and Shi, power authority. A system designed for total, automated, often terrifying control.
Yes, and their idea of non-action, Wu Wei, is crucially different from Lao Tzu's. This is the key. For Lao Tzu, the ruler achieves non-action by letting go, by decentralizing power, trusting the people, allowing things to self-organize according to their nature, minimal interference.
Okay. But the legalist ruler's non-action.
It's achieved by the exact opposite, by centralizing all power into this perfect, automated, inescapable system of laws and surveillance. The ruler can then sit back and do nothing, appear inactive, precisely because the state machine is so terrifyingly active and efficient beneath them. It does all the work of controlling, punishing, rewarding automatically. The ruler's non-action depends on the system's maximum action.
Wow, so same term, wu wei, but opposite meanings. One by letting go, the other by absolute control from behind the scenes.
Exactly. And their goals are totally opposed too. Lao Tzu's ultimate aim is the people's well-being. Peace, security, happiness, achieved through the ruler doing less. The legalist goal. The ruler's absolute unshakable power and the state's strength. Full stop.
So legalists wanted to strengthen the throne's grip. Lao Tzu wanted to weaken its power over people's actual lives.
Yes, it's a fundamental moral and structural chasm. So this idea that Lao Tzu's great image is some kind of nod to cynical legalist manipulation, it just doesn't hold up when you look closely at the core philosophies.
Okay, that's a really important clarification. It rescues Lao Tzu from that association. So with that historical confusion cleared up, we can finally bring Chapter 35 right into our own lives. How does holding the great image work personally? It sounds like this power of quiet, reliable integrity in the middle of chaos.
I think that's a great way to put it. Think about that illustrative example you used, James, the corporate sage. He's working in a really toxic environment, right? Everyone else is playing political games. That's the corporate music and fine food of gossip, backstabbing, flashy presentations that are all style and no substance, sucking up to the boss.
Yeah, the usual office drama, the finite games.
Exactly. And James, he just refuses to play. He holds on to his own great image, which translates to quiet competence, doing good work reliably, acting with integrity, being honest even when it's inconvenient.
So to his colleagues who are caught up in the drama, he probably looks, well, insipid, boring, not playing the game, maybe even naive.
Probably. But what happens over time, according to Lao Tzu's logic, the whole world, in his context, maybe his rivals, his managers, key clients, partner, they start coming to him. Why? Because in that chaotic, manipulative environment, he becomes the only truly reliable, honest, non-manipulative source, the only one you can actually trust.
So he suffers no harm from the political games because he's not participating, and he eventually achieves genuine peace, security, and prosperity. Respect, stability, maybe even promotion, not by playing the finite game better, but by sticking to that infinite, reliable foundation of integrity.
That's the principle. It's the power of the underlying reality versus the fleeting spectacle. And this offers, I think, a potent antidote to those very modern feelings we talked about at the start, that cycle of pleasure addiction followed by existential boredom.
Yeah, we have access to constant stimulation, endless spectacle, but it leaves this huge void inside, doesn't it?
It often does. The Taoist medicine, as prescribed in Chapter 35, is about cultivating that ordinary mind, finding peace, finding value, finding richness in the quiet, insipid moments between the jolts, in the foundation, not just the fireworks.
And this perspective gives us one of the most, I think, devastating critiques of our modern attention economy, doesn't it? Yuki's diagnosis seems spot on.
Absolutely sharp. All the clickbait, the manufactured outrage, the constant stream of loud noises, bright colors, strong flavors pouring out of our screens. I would say that's the desperate cry of the street performer, trying frantically to grab our fleeting attention.
And underlying that behavior, that frantic need for spectacle is
a profound lack of confidence, he argues. The attention economy has to rely on constant sensory jolts, on triggering our base emotions, precisely because it often lacks a real, lasting core value. It doesn't have a great image of its own to hold on to. So it has to simulate value constantly.
Right. It's all that spiritual MSG again. Hot takes, virtue signaling, manufactured drama, designed to give you a quick hit, make you feel something intensely for a moment, but it's ultimately unsatisfying, unsustainable.
And maybe, just maybe, the pushback we're seeing today, things like digital minimalism, the mindfulness movement, the interest in slow food, slow living, maybe these are all, in their own way, modern attempts to hold a great image.
Yeah, conscious efforts to actively reduce the external stimulation, to tune out the noise, and try to find that infinite value in the quiet, tasteless present moment, to reconnect with the foundation.
It's a struggle, but it seems like a necessary one. Now, just before we wrap up, we should add one final layer of pragmatic realism. This comes from the later philosopher Wang Fizzi.
Okay, Wang Fuzi, what did he add? A dose of reality.
Kind of. He looked at this from the perspective of actual governance in a messy world. He acknowledged that pure, passive non-action, while the ideal, is often impossible when you're dealing with immediate chaos or complex problems. He argued that a truly mature leader, while always holding the clear, ultimate Tao as their goal, must also be skilled at, well, grasping the turbid to achieve the clear.
Grasping the turbid, meaning what? Using the messy stuff.
Yes. Being able to skillfully use the turbid realities of the world, things like laws, administrative systems, maybe even strategically employed rewards, or, yes, music and food, in a limited sense to manage the immediate chaos. But always with the aim of guiding things towards that ultimate, clear, peaceful, Tao-aligned goal. It's about balancing the absolute ideal with the practical necessity of navigating the messy present.
Okay, so it's not necessarily about being purely passive, but about using even the turbid tools wisely, always in service of the clear goal, a pragmatic Taoism for leaders.
You could put it that way, a dynamic balance.
Okay, what a journey. We've gone from Chapter 12's defensive warning, don't get trapped by the senses, all the way to Chapter 35's incredibly powerful positive vision, moving from just passively avoiding the traps to actively running towards this infinite source of fulfillment and finding it in the most unlikely place, in plainness, in the insipid.
We've really zeroed in on that profound paradox that Lao Tzu forces us to confront, that the thing which seems most insipid, most formless, most soundless, the Tao, the great image, is precisely the thing that holds the most enduring attraction, offers the most genuine security, and is utterly impossible to be used up.
So let's leave everyone with that final contrast one more time. The two value propositions on offer. On the one hand, you have the music and fine food, the gourmet feasts, the thrilling experiences, the intense sensations. Exciting, yes. Finite, absolutely. And they always leave you wanting the next hit. They keep you chasing.
And on the other hand, you have the Tao, symbolized by plain rice and pure water, ordinary, maybe even boring on the surface, insipid. Yet, this is the infinite, inexhaustible nourishment, the fundamental basis on which life itself depends. It's not the chase, it's the foundation.
So 2,500 years after Lao Tzu wrote this down, he's still asking us, very quietly, a very simple question. How will you spend your life? Will you keep chasing the fleeting, finite stimulations, the fireworks? Or will you choose consciously, deliberately to hold on to that foundation, the thing that seems insipid but is truly infinite?
The answer, as Lao Tzu always suggests, isn't in some grand gesture. It lies in the quiet choices you make every single day.